I wanted to make this video to try and make people understand why characters like Heihachi, M. Bison, Akuma, or even Geese Howard will always be present in our favourite fighting games, because there have been some people, not a lot, but some people saying that they're done taking the Tekken story and the Street Fighter story seriously, and that everything that's happened in both games now means absolutely nothing because the return of Heihachi Mishima and M. Bison have been confirmed. I've said multiple times that stories do not matter as much as the gameplay, but I want to expand on that a little bit. Firstly, it's important to make a distinction here. Story modes have varying degrees of importance depending on the genre of game you're playing. Some games are almost entirely focused on their stories, and while some of these games can have engaging and fun gameplay, they're really sold on their narrative. A good example of this is The Last of Us, and a good way to show this is the reaction to The Last of Us Part 1, which was overwhelmingly positive and still remembered as one of the PlayStation 3's best experiences, and then The Last of Us Part 2, which was extremely controversial and received a lot of hate from its own fan base and people from the outside looking in. The story in The Last of Us was praised for being very touching, well-paced and rewarding, with an ending that left a lot of open-ended debates that still go on today on whether Joel did the right thing. The Last of Us Part 2 opened with shock factor that left a bad taste in people's mouths and undermined Joel's character. Despite the gameplay still being pretty good in the second game, albeit a little bit dated, the story really turned people off that game. A game like Kingdom Hearts has a very unique and exciting story, and whilst the narrative work in these games is nothing to scoff at, the gameplay is so insane in a lot of these games that they were able to get away with telling a story that almost nobody fully understands, is extremely convoluted, and sometimes struggles to even make sense of itself. If the gameplay wasn't so well done, people may not have been so forgiving to the story, especially by the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, which many found to be a cop-out. Despite this, more Kingdom Hearts games have been announced, and as long as they can continue to bring the wacky, over-the-top gameplay that lets you visit interesting worlds from the world of Disney and Square Enix, people will let it slide. So whilst the stories mattered in both of these games, one was able to take serious liberties and lean on its gameplay, and the other wasn't. This is where fighting games come in. To say a fighting game story doesn't matter in its entirety would be an absolute lie. A big reason for why we get so attached to these characters is due to the roles they play in the stories. Up until Mortal Kombat vs DC, fighting game stories were never taken seriously, given no attention and kinda swept under the rug. But just because they didn't have big cinematic cutscenes to go with them back in the day, doesn't mean they weren't there and weren't having a big impact on the player bases and their decisions in who they decide to pick. One of the reasons I started playing Tekken is because I was drawn to Kazuya. So when he disappeared in Tekken 3 because Heihachi threw him into an active volcano, I wasn't that interested in the game. Granted, because it's Tekken I still played it because I am a big fan of the franchise, but it wasn't the same. I'll never forget being a 10-year-old kid and getting my copy of Tekken 4 and seeing an image of Kazuya on the front of the case and being really confused, and then getting home, popping the disc in, and this opening comes on. I literally almost jumped out of my seat. My guy had returned from the dead, and he did it in epic fashion. It had been 4 years since any of us got to see or play with Kazuya, so it was an awesome moment for us, and I never skipped that opening. Till this day, Tekken 4's opening still remains as one of the greatest openings in all of video games. And seeing Heihachi Mishima walk out of that smoke of fire on the Evo stage made me remember what it felt like to be a kid again. Do you guys remember when Michael Murray said that people were hyped for Lydia? It was just the Japanese public, and that they are notoriously quiet, and so it seemed like on camera there wasn't a lot of hype for her. We all know that's a massive lie. The crowd was quiet because Lydia isn't a hype inducing character. I think she's cool and I actually like Lydia, but nobody's jumping out of their seats, calling their friends, or having reaction videos where multiple streamers react in the same way with glee and awe over a character like Lydia. There are people that are really excited over her, but you could probably count them on one hand. This is the crowd reacting to Lydia. And this is the crowd reacting to Heihachi Mishima. So for the people that think Harada has destroyed his game's story by having Heihachi return, please look at the joy and glee on these people's faces. The game was never going to be better off without him, and the fan base would have suffered for it. Through the actions of these characters in the stories of these games, they have now basically obtained immortality because people won't let them go, and their aura is undeniable. Their aura supersedes whatever happens in the stories. That, however, doesn't mean the stories are irrelevant in fighting games. The stories are actually very important, and their integrity can be held up most of the time as long as the character doesn't get too big for the universe they're in. But that is unfortunately for you guys what has happened with Heihachi Mishima. Now that still doesn't mean that the stories are irrelevant, that they've been ruined, or that a certain love and care shouldn't go into them. We can see from Heihachi's trailer that they have carefully crafted out a story for his return, and there's probably something bigger looming on the horizon, and this will add to the allure around Heihachi and draw people into playing the story mode a little bit more. I think it's a little bit silly to say Reina no longer matters when we don't know what direction they're taking her in, and although she had involvement in the Tekken 8 story, it was only to further her need and her want for the Devil Gene, although we do not know where this is going to go because she didn't actually get into a fight with anybody using this. This all could have been a ploy to bring Heihachi back. For all we know, she is going to try and pass on the Devil Gene to her father, who, as we all know, have been trying to get the Devil Gene since Tekken 1. But how else will we connect with characters if not for the cleverly crafted story modes? We probably wouldn't, but there comes a time when the popularity of a character outweighs the direction of the story. Sometimes a story can be going down a certain road, but the course needs to be corrected because the character's return is demanded. This is again something that is almost exclusive to fighting games, and it's especially true in fighting games because a big moneymaker for these games are their characters. You can kill a Michelle Chang, you can kill a Christy Monteiro, you can even kill Ganryu, because most people do not care about them. Now I know Michelle has her fan base, I know Christy has her fan base, but I think the Christy and the Michelle fan bases can both probably accept that they pale in comparison to the weight that Heihachi carries in this game and in this franchise. On a grand scale, they never did enough to be liked by a mass audience to elicit such a reaction, and so their movesets can move on to someone else, and that's what we see with characters like Julia Chang. Then there are those that eradicate the function idea because the character is irreplaceable. It's not one rule for all, it all differs per character. Some characters become so legendary that it is impossible to move beyond them. Of course, developers have ignored this fact before and tried to replace legendary characters with knockoff versions, but it's never been a good idea. Everyone remembers Soul Calibur 5. Gameplay was very stellar in my opinion, but they removed a lot of the fan favorites and replaced it with new characters posing as their children using their moves. Nobody liked it, most people complained about it, and it definitely hurt Soul Calibur 5. Do you remember when Goku died at the end of the Cell Saga to save Earth and give Gohan a chance? Well, it wasn't the first time he had died, but it was certainly meant to be the last time we saw Goku as the lead hero. Akira Toriyama's original vision, according to many close to him, was that Gohan was supposed to take over the series as the mainstay main character, and whilst this happened for a brief moment in time, fans demanded the return of Goku. Eventually, Goku was written back into the story as the lead character, with Vegeta in a close second, and whilst this may have disappointed some at the time, it would have hurt the franchise if Goku was no longer the lead. In anime or TV shows in general, it's easier to kill a beloved character and get away with leaving them dead to further the show, but it has to be done right and meaningfully or people will moan about it. A big reason for why people don't like Boruto is not because they killed Naruto, he is still present in the series, it's because we came to love this character and he has now taken a back seat to a character a lot of people do not like. The transition was not executed well and the franchise has suffered for it. It's much more difficult and basically unacceptable to do in a fighting game because we interact with the characters. It's also why having them in flashbacks isn't favourable either, because the same way people loved growing with Heihachi over the years is the same way they want to see him grow in the years to come and subsequently grow with him. We still want more memories created with Heihachi so that when we look back in 30 years time when a lot of us are old men, we have a lot to pull from. Fighting games are all about their special moments in their story modes, and it would be a shame if they all ended in Tekken 7 with Heihachi. Whilst Tekken 7 was presented as the end of the Mishima saga, I'm unsure as to why people are jumping to the conclusion that the Mishima saga is going to be reignited. The Mishima saga basically alludes to the fact that Kazuya and Heihachi were warring with each other since Tekken 1. Even though Jin is clearly a Mishima, that is what a lot of people associate the Mishima saga with. Now, following the events of Tekken 7 with Heihachi's supposed death, and then in Tekken 8 with Kazuya's defeat, it looks like the game is going to go off in a different direction. However, if we want to be particular about it, it was always going to be a Mishima saga, because now Reina has the Devil Gene and Reina is a Mishima. But the concern of people is that everything that Kazuya did in Tekken 7 is meaningless, and that the Mishima saga has not ended. But the Mishima saga hadn't ended in Tekken 8, and we already knew that because Reina was present, Jin is still there, and Kazuya is not dead. I don't think people should be jumping to conclusions so soon, since we have no idea how Heihachi has been resurrected and what his plans are going forward. People saying that there's no new ground to tread here are either not using their imagination or are just solely focused on the fact that Heihachi has returned, even though everyone that has played Tekken before would have known that Heihachi was going to come back. This is now the third time he has returned from the dead, and he is not the only Mishima to return from the dead, and I'm sure this will probably happen again in the future because they are Mishimas. They are important to the longevity of the Tekken franchise, and the story is never going to be better off without them. Just look at the reaction to Heihachi coming back and his story mode trailer. People were very interested in the story mode before. I think it would be fair to say that they are astronomically more interested in the story now that they know Heihachi is a massive part of it. Canon Heihachi is better than flashback Heihachi, and he always will be. It's very hard to create a character that has people on their feet when they return. It's hard to create a character that has everybody smiling, getting out of their seats, and putting their hands on their heads. It's not something you can just let go. Not when it's a fighting game, at least. And certainly not when they're as important to the roster as Heihachi. For many years, The Undertaker was considered the cornerstone of the WWE, and I guess you could probably say the same thing about Heihachi Mishima. A character so beloved despite all his villainy, his death made grown men cry, and his return elicited maximum amounts of joy.
Das ist Heihachi!
Oh mein Gott! Warte! Was ist das?
There is no fucking Hutch is back! Fucking Hutch is back!
This was the right time to bring Heihachi back, not 3 or 4 seasons later. Tekken 8 now feels as hype as it did before it launched, and it will be a very easy thing to continue, seeing as Tekken has a rich and deep history of characters that are yet to return and many people have clamored for. So you could keep this hype going for years to come depending on who you put in this game. I hope I've made my case clear for why Heihachi's return is a good thing, why it is a net positive and keeping him dead would have hurt Tekken in the long run. I hope I've made the case for why its story and the series longevity needs Heihachi in it as well as the other Mishimas, and why it is always better to keep him in the game rather than keep him dead.
わしこそが三島平八じゃ